Hello, second grade. All right, I'm back. I have the hockey helmet off and put up, and I'm donning my Abraham Lincoln outfit for you. Again, still need to do something about that gray. And no mustache, though. Yeah, I just wanted to, before we begin, review a little bit about what we read before. Remember, we read about Robert E. Lee, okay? General Lee. Oh, I just gave it away. My next question was going to be, what ranking was he? Was he a sergeant? Was he a captain? He was a general, okay? So he was in charge of an army, the entire army. Now, if you recall, the reason why I'm saying it like that, if you recall, Abraham Lincoln asked him to be the general of the Union Army or the North Army. And he didn't really want to because he took an oath to defend the United States of America. And if he became a general in the Union Army, then he would be battling people in the South who are Americans. And then he was asked by Jefferson Davis to be a general in the Confederate Army, which he really didn't want to do that either. Because same reason he took an oath, he felt like he would be battling Americans either way. But then, if you recall what his home state was, started with a V, Virginia, okay? He loved his home state so much that he decided that he would defend Virginia, which it was a Confederate state. So he became a general for the Confederate Army or for the Confederacy. All right, so that's a little bit about a little review about Robert E. Lee or General Lee. So today we're going to read a little bit about Ulysses S. Grant. So Ulysses S. Grant, well, I guess we'll find out a little bit about him. But before we start, we have some of our vocabulary words that are going to show up in our reading today. The first word, can you see that? I think you should be able to see that. That word starts with an A, ammunition. So I think we all know what ammunition means. We live in Montana. A lot of us hunt, right? But ammunition is the material you put in your gun, or the materials you put in a cannon to be fired. All of that is ammunition. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. That's going to come up in our reading today. The next word is defeat. Defeat. And I don't mean, defeat, right? My 2 feet. Defeat are in the shoes. I don't mean those defeat. I mean the defeat. If one soccer team plays another soccer team, and I know we have a lot of soccer players in our class. If one soccer team plays another soccer team, one team will defeat the other team. The winning team defeats the losing team. So that's what defeat means. Next are rations. Rations. Rations are usually food that we set aside or that are set aside for somebody. I guess, for example, when we send astronauts up into the space station, we have to ration their food or put their food aside so they have just the right amount for each day. So they ration their food, okay? And rations are the food itself. The food are the rations. Okay, the next word starts with an S. This one right here. Surrendered. Surrendered means that one team, one army kind of gave up and decided that there's no way that they're going to win, so they surrender to the other one. So surrendered, defeated, kind of similar in meanings. And then the last one is kind of a fun one. Hope you can all see that. Starts with the Y. And it's a nickname given to the soldiers from the Union or from the North. They are Yankees. And I have this here. The New York Yankees is a baseball team from New York. New York was a Union state after all. So the Yankees is just the name and nickname given to soldiers or people really who are from the North, from the Union States. And so we kind of throw that around, Yankees. It's just kind of a slang, kind of a word we use just for fun. All right, so we're gonna take a little tour of the classroom here. Let's do a little tour. Windows, shades are drawn to reduce the glare. It's still kind of messy in here. Trying to keep it somewhat organized. Okay, we have our board, the game changer board, and we are back here. Set that up so we can see our chart. And we are going to do our read aloud today. The old man glasses, the nerd glasses, here we go. The date was May 4th, 1864. The day before, marching with the strength of over 118,000 soldiers, the Army of the Potomac crossed the Rapidan River in the middle of Virginia. The Blue Ridge Mountains lay west. To the east lay miles of dark forests and Confederate army under the command of Robert E. Lee. General Lee had roughly 60,000 men under his command, half as many as the Union Army, but they were ready to put up a strong fight. The Union Army was commanded by, who are we learning about today? Ulysses S. Grant. So this is probably Grant right here, Ulysses S. Grant. He was no stranger to battle. He had served in the Army for over 25 years, starting when he was just 17 years old. The Civil War was not his first war either. Like the Confederate General Robert E. Lee, General Grant had fought in another war. General Ulysses S. Grant leaned against a post outside his tent. The word post is a sentence that means a piece of wood or metal set in the ground in an upright position. He warily watched as a long line of supply wagons carrying ammunition, food, and medical supplies rumbled past. The word ammunition refers to the bullets, cannonballs, etc. that are shot out of weapons. These supply wagons made up the rear or backside of the army. The main body of the army, the soldiers who needed all these supplies in order to fight, were miles ahead, deep in the forest looking for the enemy. Who was the enemy of the Union Army? The Confederate Army, right? General Grant was now the general-in-chief of the entire Union Army. The only person who ranked higher than General Grant was President Lincoln. Grant took his orders from Lincoln, and everyone else took their orders from Grant. Every general in the war faced hard choices and had heavy responsibilities with the lives of thousands of soldiers in his hands. But in 1864, no general had more worries than General Grant. Why do you think he had so many worries? Well, because he was in charge of the Union Army. That's a lot of responsibility. Do you have responsibilities at home? I bet you do. I bet you all have some responsibilities. General Grant had spent the first 3 years of the Civil War fighting farther west, away from the action in Virginia. His most impressive victory in the early years of the war came at Vicksburg, a city in Mississippi. The same day that the Union Army had won the Battle of Gettysburg, General Grant won the Battle of Vicksburg after 2 long, hard months. The victory gave the Union final control over the entire Mississippi River, which in turn would make it easier for the Union to take over the rest of the South. The Mississippi River was important because the Union could use it to send troops and supplies from the north to the south. It was easier to use a river to do this because there were no cars or trucks yet, and so there were no highways like we have today. So they could put them on boats and send them down the Mississippi River. To win the Civil War, the Union needed to take control of the South, including all of its cities and roads. Nobody in the North expected this to be so difficult. Remember, they thought it would be over quickly. The Union had more than 1 million men in uniform. What color was the Union Army again? It's hard to tell by that picture, but Union was blue. Okay, and the Confederate Army wore gray. By the end of the Civil War, 1 out of every 10 Union soldiers was African American, and 1 out of 4 Union sailors was African American. Late in the war, the U.S. Congress passed a bill that gave equal pay to African American soldiers who valiantly fought to help save the Union and bring freedom from slavery. Factories in the North had been working day and night for years, producing weapons, uniforms, blankets, food rations, wagons, and all other things they needed. Again, rations are the amount of food and other materials set aside for one person. The Yankees, as the Union soldiers were nicknamed, had everything they needed to fight and win the war. The Confederates, or rebels, as they were often called, did not have as many men as the Union. The South did not have many factories. Many of those it did have early in the war had been destroyed or captured by 1864. Confederate soldiers marched to battle without shoes, without enough food, and sometimes without enough ammunition. Yet even though they were exhausted and starved, the Confederates somehow held on and managed to keep fighting. General Grant was not the general-in-chief of the Union Army at the beginning of the Civil War. Throughout the war, President Lincoln had trouble with some of his top Union generals. It wasn't that they were bad generals. They could win battles and capture enemy forts and towns, but they made mistakes as well. They often waited too long to attack or failed to chase the Confederates when they were on the run. Basically, President Lincoln felt that the Union generals were never aggressive or forceful enough. But Grant was different. General Grant had won the long battle of Vicksburg because he was stubborn and unafraid. He kept fighting and attacking until the enemy surrendered or gave up. President Lincoln put General Grant in charge of the entire Union Army because Grant promised that he would do whatever it took to win. He would chase General Robert E. Lee and his army all over Virginia, and he would not stop until the war was finished. This outlook earned him the nickname Unconditional Surrender because he would accept nothing less from the Confederate Army than a complete surrender. Do you think General Grant will get the Confederate Army to surrender? General Grant removed a folded letter from his breast pocket. President Lincoln had sent this letter a few days earlier. It did not contain any vital or necessary information or new orders. It was just a simple letter sent to wish him good luck in battle. Grant reread the letter written in the president's own handwriting. Lieutenant General Grant. Here's what it said in the letter. Not expecting to see you again before you march into Virginia, I wish to tell you that I am entirely satisfied or happy with what you have done up to this time. You are alert and self-reliant. And pleased with this, I do not want to control your actions in any way. If there's anything wanting which is within my power to give, do not fail to let me know it. And now with a brave army and a just cause, may God sustain you. Yours very truly, A. Lincoln. Wow. A handwritten letter from President Lincoln. I wonder where that letter is. I wonder if it's in a museum somewhere. The next day, May 5th, in the forest near Fredericksburg, Virginia, the main body of Grant's army clashed with General Lee's army in one of the wildest battles of the war. In those days, armies always preferred to fight in open fields where it was easier to move cannons and large groups of men and easier for generals to see what was happening. This time, though, the armies met deep in the woods where the tree and plant growth was so heavy that the soldiers could barely see one another. This was called the Battle of the Wilderness, and it was the very first time Generals Grant and Lee faced each other in battle. The Battle of the Wilderness was the first battle they faced each other in battle. It was a very chaotic battle. Thousands were killed and wounded. At the end of the day, both armies limped away with no clear winner in the battle. Try to show that so you can see it without the glare. It's a little better. After the battle, many of the Union wounded were taken to churches and homes in the nearby city of Fredericksburg. Clara Barton was there in one of those churches, tending to the wounded soldiers. Who was Clara Barton? Oh yeah, she was that person that helped everybody. She was kind of acted as a nurse, and the American Red Cross began because of her. The next day, hundreds more wounded soldiers were brought in from yet another battle, and it went on. The armies of General Grant and Lee met again and again during the months that followed. Sometimes Grant won the battle, sometimes Lee won, and sometimes nobody won. But with each battle, the Confederate army got a little smaller and that much closer to final defeat. All right, so we have this image. Who's pictured in this image? What soldiers were pictured here? If you can see that, they're dressed in blue. It was Union soldiers. They're soldiers from the Union Army. Why do you think Ulysses S. Grant was given the nickname Unconditional Surrender? Unconditional. Unconditional means that there's no way they're going to do it. There's no way they're going to surrender. And surrender means you kind of give up. Okay? He was given that name because he was not going to give up. In this read aloud, you heard that General Grant won the Battle of Vicksburg because he was stubborn and unafraid. How might being stubborn and unafraid help someone win a battle? How about just a soccer game? If you're stubborn and unafraid, how might that help you? It means you're not going to give up and you're going to play hard, right? So that same skill worked on the battlefield. And then the last two questions. What was the nickname given to the Union soldiers? Starts with a Y. The Yankees. And what was the nickname given to the Confederate soldiers? The Rebels, right? So we had the Yankees and the Rebels. All right. So this was the color picture that for the read aloud. I hope you were doing that. I apologize I didn't mention that, but you pretty much got the drill figured out. So in this picture, I'd like you to give me 3 sentences, or at least 2 sentences. 2 sentences about Ulysses S. Grant. Okay, sentences. They begin with and end with, okay. What army was he in charge of? What was the nickname given to that army? What color did they wear? What was his nickname? Okay, I want to see some of that stuff in here. Okay, and then you can draw a picture of Ulysses S. Grant. You can draw a picture of a Union soldier. You can draw a picture of a battle in the wilderness. That was a long battle, and there was no real clear winner on that one. And why was the wilderness different again? than other battles, because other battles were in like open fields and that sort of thing, and the generals could see everything that was going on. So the wilderness was different than all of that. So get that done. Get this sent over to me. Don't forget to put your names on them. All right. And that is it for our knowledge lesson and our lesson on the Civil War. I hope you're all doing well. I miss you guys. And we're going to do some handwriting, and then we'll be done. So take a little break, use the bathroom, get a drink of water, go outside, stretch your legs, run around, and enjoy the nice weather. Bye.